We're here now on the bottom of Kuf Ches Amud Aleph, on the last line on the And now we quote Rabbi Shimon Levi with regard to Leila Seder. Rabbi Shimon Levi, Noshim Chayovos Bi'arba Kosas Halolu. Women, like men, are obligated in the 4 cups of wine. This despite the fact that it's a classic mitzvah saseshes man groma. And here we turn to Daf Kuf Ches Amud Beis. The reason why they're chayav is because afhein hayu ba'osanes, they were also, no less than the men, included in the great miracle of Yitzias Mitzrayim. And the Rashbam here quotes a Gemara in Sota b'schar noshim tikonios shahayu b'yosa ador nigalu avoseinu b'Mitzrayim. And the Rashbam seems to take the position that afhein hayu means that they were part of the cause of the miracle. In fact, he goes on and he equates it with Mikra Megillah, Dal Yidei Esther Havi, that Esther brought about the great salvation of Purim. V'chein legabi Chanukah, and also in the case of Chanukah, the women played a major role, and that's why they were the Ikar Nes, Yehudis at the time of Chanukah, Esther at the time of Purim, and Noshim Tzidkonios at the time of the Gulus Mitzrayim. And Tosfos points out, Dibra Maskal Hayu, that the language Af Hein Hayu Botzanes sounds like they weren't the Ikar Nes. And based on this, Tosfos elsewhere has a Havamina that women should be obligated in Sukkah because Af Hein Hayu Botzanes, they were part of the miracle of the Anani Kavod. And in that sense, we need a special limud to derive ha'ezrach that women are exempt from sukkah. What was the havamina? I mean, according to the Rashbam, I don't think we would say that the women played necessarily the major role, the ikar nes of Anani HaKavod. And therefore, Tosfos learns that afein hayus benes means be also sakana. Like, for example, in the case of Purim, it's lahashmid la'aragula abed, Noshim V'taf, etc. And in the case of Chanukah, all the Xeris of the Yevonim, the women, and certainly in Sukkah, in the Havamina that they should be chayav in Sukkah because of Anani Kavod, they were no less than men included in the miracle. They needed the miracle, not that they brought about the miracle, as the Rashbam would have. And Tosfos says that the Havamina here before Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi was Zman Groma, even though we're talking about a mitzvah d'Rabbanan of Dalit Kosos, but called the Rabbanan came to Araisa Tikkun, and therefore the Rabbanan would also be bound by this limitation and exempt women from a time-bound mitzvah, and Kamash Valon, Afein Hoybos on this. Now, do women have the exact same chiv as men? That I'm not sure. It could be Afein Hoybos on this, especially according to Tosfos Pshat, means that they have a chiyuv, but it's not the same chiyuv as a man's chiyuv. And that touches on the famous Shitas HaBahag, that a woman, even though she's obligated in hearing the Megillah because she was part of the Nes of Purim, of Laharig, etc., nevertheless, she cannot be motzi a man. She doesn't have the identical chiyuv as a man. Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel, Arba Kos Halol, Tzorch Sheyeheba in Kedei Mezigas Kos Yofe. Now, normally, when we talk about Kedei Mezigas Kos Yofe, we are talking about the kos of Birkas HaMazon, which is called Kos Yofe. And the Gemara says in Brachos Adaf Nun Aleph, Asor Dvarim Nemru B'Kos Shel Bracha, to be miyape the kos. And for example, you need Mariko Shtifa, you rinse out the kos amongst the 10 things. And the kos of Birkas HaMazon therefore serves as a paradigm of a kos shel bracha, and therefore applying this at Shmuel to the case of Dalit Kosos, we would also require Kedei Mezigas Kos Yofe. Now, within the halachas of Kos Yofe, we have a halach of a shear of a certain minimum volume of wine that has to be in the kos, and that would be what's called rova revius halug of yain chai, right? They had concentrated wine, and you needed a minimum amount of concentrated wine such that when you dilute it, you'll end up with mali lugmov, which is rov revius. So what you need is a quarter of a revius of yain chai, and then you're going to add 3 parts to 1 part in order to make it into a revius. So you have a quarter of a revius halug, adding 3 times that amount of mayim and making it tarovis to dilute it, you would end up with a revius halug. And that's the minimum shear that you would require for dalid kosas, which is the same shear as the kos of birkas hamazon. Shesan chai, he drank undiluted, concentrated wine, yotza, that's still called yayin. Again, he's going to have to drink a substantial volume of yayin chai. Shesan vas achas yotza. According to Shmuel, if he pours 4 cups of wine, he drinks them consecutively, one after the other, without reading on God, without any of the mitzvahs of a laila, he was yotze. Hishkamen lebanav l'bneiso yotze. Even if he didn't drink the whole kos himself, he shared it with the members of his household, he was yotze. And now the Gemara goes back to clarify the words of Shmuel. Shesan chai yotze. He drank it concentrated wine, undiluted wine, and he was yotze. Amar Rav, but wait a minute. Yidei yayin yotze, yidei cherus lo yotze. You can't consider this derech cherus to drink concentrated wine. That's not derech cherus. Beautiful, tasty wine is something that's diluted. Very concentrated wine is very difficult, very uncomfortable. So as far as yayin is concerned, you have a mitzvah of drinking 4 cups of wine. You drank 4 cups of wine. But the additional dimension, namely of derech cherus, that you forfeited when you drank mayim chai. Shesan bevas achas, getting back to another din of Shmuel, he drank 4 cups of wine consecutively. Rav Amar Yotza, Yidei Yayin Yotza, but Yidei Armakosos Lo Yotza. Now, as far as derech cherus is concerned, Rav would say, you yotze, you drank 4 cups derech cherus. They were good, diluted, tasty cups of wine. There were 4 different cups. But as far as dalid kosos is concerned, meaning that each one of the 4 kosos has its own unique bracha. The first kos is a kos shel kiddush, the second kos shel magid, which ends with Kol Yisrael. Third kos is the kos of birkas hamazon, the fourth the kos of Hallel. You did not fulfill kos shel bracha, because in order to fulfill kos shel bracha, you have to recite the bracha on the kos and then drink subsequent to the bracha. And basically, according to Rav, we have 2 dimensions to the mitzvah daled kosos. One is shtia derech cherus, and you have to drink 4 different cups. That he did in this case of bevas achas. But the other dimension, the other kiyum, is to drink a kos shel bracha. Chiddush of Rav is that even though it's not a kos shel bracha, nevertheless you have a shtia derech cherus of 4 kosos. Now, in the case of yain chai, what we have is just the reverse. We're missing the derech cherus element in the equation because it's not comfortable to drink chai, but we have the element of 4 kosos of yayin, and even yayin chai qualifies as yayin. Therefore, when he drinks 4 of those kosos, I'll say to Rav brachos, he's yotze at least the mitzvah of daled kosos. He's lacking, and he forfeits the mitzvah of derech cherus. In the case of son bevas achas, he drinks 4 cups, one after the other consecutively. There he obtains the kiyum of derech cherus, but he forfeits the kiyum of daled kosos shel bracha. When you divvy up the costs amongst your family members, then you have to leave for yourself a minimum of rov kos. So let's say the 49% of the volume of the kos of the yayin in the kos you can share with the members of your family. You drank 51% or more of that yayin. That's called rov kos. And the Ramban learns from this that if you have a large cup that you use for the Seder, for the Dalit cup, you have to drink rov of that kos. There's a minimum absolute share of Malo Lugma, of rov revius, but that's for a small cup. But if you're using a larger cup, you have to drink rov kos. And he sees the source here in the words of Hani Mili the Ishte Ruba de Kos. Meisvei, the Gemara has to cash on Shmuel, who says that you need Kidei Mizigas Kos Yofer, Arba Kos Alod, Tzarshiemen Kidei Revius, Echad Chai V'Echad Mazug, Echad Chadash V'Echad Yashan, and we need something called Kidei Shir Revius. Each kos has to have a revius, and it doesn't matter whether it's concentrated wine or diluted wine, whether it's new wine, which doesn't have really the time of yayin, or old wine, which is mitzubach. It's really got that beautiful taste of wine. But in any event, no matter what it is, whether it's chai, whether it's mazug, whether it's yashan, chadash, it always requires the minimum shir of revius. Rabbi Yehuda Omer tzarich shehebo tam. In other words, we need the taste of wine, meaning an intoxicating element in the wine. And that excludes the case of yayin chadash, right? Vintage wine has an intoxicating element. It's a davar mishaker, but brand new wine is not mishaker, and therefore it should be excluded. Not only that, we require, in addition, Marian. Now, this enters into the whole issue of red wine versus white wine for the Daled Kosas. And it seems from the Gemara, Marian, that you need red wine. That's obviously wine. And that seems to be a separate halach in the Daled Kosas. So that perhaps the Daled Kosos, since you're demonstrating cherus, it has to be obvious. And white wine is not so obvious. Red wine is not. Or alternatively, the red color might be symbolic of dam, b'damai chayi, dam pesach, dam mila. Then the Brisa says, kidei revius, that we require a full shear of a revius, which we already saw in the Tanakhama. So in that case, universally it's accepted without any dissenting view that the Daled Kosas require a shear of revius. And you were telling me that all you need, atam kos yafe. In other words, it's not the same shear as kedei revius. You're telling me the shear is kos yafe. The language of Shmuel is kedei mizigas kos yafe, which is less than a revius. The Gemara says, Amri, no. Idi ve'idi chachiruhu, kidei revius and kidei mezigas kos yafe are identical. They're just two different ways of saying the same thing. And kidei mezigas kos yafe hainu revius. So it's all the same amount. So don't be mistaken and think that mezigas kos yafe is a different shear. It's less than a revius. No, it's a revius. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, tzorech sheyehebo tam umare. In other words, we must have wine that has a tam of yayin and it has the mara of yayin. Omar Rav, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. Why does he require tam and mara? Tichsiv, he bases himself on a pasuk which is Mishlei authored by Shlomo HaMelech regarding Shtias Yayin. He says, Altera Yayin ki yis adam. Don't be overwhelmed, overpowered by a chemda, a desire, a craving, because you're constantly drinking wine. And what is this wine? It is Adom, it's red wine. That's its color. And it's nechmad umeshubach. It's a very high quality and tasty wine. We see that yayin must be adom, it must be red. And from the fact that Shlomo Melech warns us not to get drunk, not to drink too much, it means it has a tam yayin, it has some intoxicating element. Torah Rabbana kol chayom be'arba kos halolu echad anoshim v'echad noshim v'echad tinokos Rabbi Yehuda v'chima toelos yesh l'tinokos b'yayin. The Tanakama of this price says that everyone is chayiv v'dalad kosis, and on the list he includes tinokos because they also experienced and were saved by Geulas Mitzrayim. But on the other hand, Rabbi Yehuda says, how can you be mechayiv tinokos? Ma toelos yesh v'tinokos. A tinokos is potem from all the mitzvahs. You can't be mechayiv tinokos. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda suggests el mechalkin lahem, and here we turn to Kuftes, kloyos ve'gozim b'erev Pesach. Let's give out charcoal is sort of baked. They used to bake in an oven chitim, or they used to sometimes torch it over the fire, and it was very tasty. Or a gozim of nuts, children like nuts. And kidei shal yidei shatinokos yiru shinui shemakdimim lehem loseis lehem kloyos ve'gozim l'fnei asuda lo yishnu v'yishal. This will keep them awake, and they won't sleep, and they will ask the manishtan. And the Brisa tells us the story. Amar Lav Rabbi Akiva she'imachali kloyos ve'gozim l'tinokos ve'erev Pesach kidei shelo yishnu v'yishalem. And going back to the Brisa on Amud Aleph, we said that Rabbi Yehuda had a very strong argument against the Tanakama. We never find that tinokos are obligated in mitzvahs. Quite clearly, cutting this potem in mitzvahs. So how can you possibly include them in the chiyuv of Daled Kosos? So the Rabbeinu David, the Talmud and the Ramban, asks, what did the Tanakam have in mind? How is it exactly Mechayiv the Ketanim? Therefore, he interprets that what the Tanakam had in mind was to be Mechayiv the Ketanim din chinuch. And on that, Rabbi Yehuda says that all mitzvahs, the Zman chinuch is mishashi odea lasosa kirmos shehu. That the shear, the minimum age for chinuch of a katan, is when he's capable of doing the mitzvah in its full capacity, in the ideal way. The katan cannot implement and reflect derech cherus. Therefore, there's no chiyuv chinuch. And we found something very similar with regard to Avelus Rachmana litzlan, in the case where somebody dies and he leaves a young child, that there's no chinuch for Avelus, because the Avelus is not something that he's mature enough to experience. And here we find the simcha of drinking wine for derech cherus, for Yetzias Mitzrayim, is something that a katan is not capable of. And interesting is that the Rashbam, on the previous sugya, on Daf, where is it? On Daf Kuf Chesam and Beis, you'll see a Rashbam Yidei Yayin Yotza. And that's the case where, according to Rav, if he drinks 4 cups of wine, one after the other, he's Yotze Yidei Yayin. And the Rashbam interprets it, Mishum Simchas Yontif. And that's the intoxicating element in the wine, and that's why we require yain mishubach to engender a state of simcha. That's not something that a child is capable of. And that's why Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa rejects the opinion of the Tanakh. Kama says, no, derech, again, maybe the shtiyas yayin is not so appropriate for a katan, he's not in, but the concept of doing all these actions, derech cherus, that's something that a child has to be educated. Yes, chinuch of a katan from a young age. So let's just make a note of where we got up to. We're up to Kuftes, Amid Aleph, Tanya, the brisa here on the fourth line down from the top. Thank you very much.